Hi, everyone. Welcome, friends of the planet. It's Monica Medina here from Our Daily Planet. We are thrilled to be joined here today by Elizabeth Maruma Mrema of the Convention on Biodiversity. She's the executive secretary, which means she's the boss. And we are thrilled to have her with us today to talk about the report that they issued yesterday about the status of global biodiversity leading into next year's Conference of the Parties, next year's COP on biodiversity, which was delayed by a year and will be an important milestone in changing the course of biodiversity loss in the world. So welcome, Executive Secretary Mrema. Thank you so much for your time. This year has been sort of an unusual year. As I mentioned, everything has changed because of the COVID pandemic. Do you think that the virus set back efforts to finish the 2020 goals, and will it impede efforts to reach agreement on the 2030 goals? You were pretty tough on yourselves in the assessment that you released yesterday, saying that you had failed. I think we judged it more to be an incomplete. So I'm wondering how COVID impacted that and how it will impact us going forward.
Thank you very much for the question. I won't say that COVID has impacted reaching the targets by the end of the year. Remember, COVID only came beginning of this year, and this was the 10th year, while the targets were adopted 10 years ago. So reaching the targets has nothing to do with COVID. We cannot blame it. However, what is important with the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic is the wake-up call we got from it, because now it has shown the linkages and the relationship that human has on nature. But in terms of meeting the targets, they have no relation. If countries were up to their commitments and their ambition to meet the targets, I'm sure then the statistics will not have been as low as they are. Because even the few targets where there is progress, still the scorecard shows less than 30%.
It is hard to blame everything on the pandemic, but it feels like such a burden right now. What other things I thought was really excellent about the report was its focus on the future and going forward and how to make up the ground that you haven't quite achieved by 2020. The report discusses mainstreaming, which is a term that our readers and followers may not be familiar with. Could you explain what that is and why it's so important for achieving the biodiversity goals?
Biodiversity conservation is a precondition to achieving sustainable development. Basically, simply put, biodiversity mainstreaming is ensuring that biodiversity and the services it provides are adequately factored into all policies, all practices that we rely upon and have an impact on biodiversity and the services. We can look at the success and be able to measure whether our behavior, attitude, or position to embrace biodiversity information and knowledge has taken place. At national level, when we talk of biodiversity mainstreaming, it is often looked at when long-term strategies are developed. Or, another example, look at biodiversity mainstreamed into agriculture, forestry, or fisheries sectors. It is the soil where agriculture production is. It is the marine environment where we have the fish and where we pollute with plastics and therefore the impact. It is the forest where we get the timber and the impact on deforestation. All these are connected, and therefore in terms of long-term strategies, we need them to be mainstream. And this is where we call of whole government, whole society, across sectors, working together.
Yes, it's more than just make a park or protected area. It's a good chance for me to ask you about how your work and the work of the convention and this report coming out right before UN Climate Week, and then you all have an important summit coming up on the 30th of September, again, talking about biodiversity. Talk about the synergies between biodiversity and solving the climate crisis.
What has basically now proven scientifically beyond doubt is the interconnectedness between climate change and biodiversity, or climate crisis and biodiversity crisis. Biodiversity provides almost 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions, and therefore biodiversity provides climate change adaptation and mitigation measures. No wonder now both climate change and biodiversity were all talking of nature-based solutions, meaning even the climate community depend on nature to provide solutions for climate mitigation and adaptation. And this is where we are talking of our relationship between people and nature and the impact of human actions on nature.
So let's talk about one of the major actors in the world, China, and their efforts to develop what they call the Belt and Road Initiative, which is a huge effort at helping other countries build up their infrastructure. But it could be that that initiative will actually make it harder to reach some of the biodiversity goals that you're aiming for by 2030. It just happens that China will be the chair of the convention next year when you have this very important conference of the parties. How do you think that will affect the way they chair the meeting? And do you think the fact that they're chairing the meeting might change some of their actions and make them more sustainable in that Belt and Road Initiative?
Not an easy question, but what I can say, of course, Belt and Road Initiative is a China-led effort to promote economic development and interregional connectivity. It's about 115 or so countries. Arguably also is the largest single investment in infrastructure in generations. It's an undertaking which involves trillions of dollars of investments. It's transport, energy, infrastructure, telecommunication, industrial capacity, technical, many areas. We are aware that China has been working hard to ensure that all the decisions being taken are based on a sound knowledge and sound science. And the mitigation of any likely impacts will be built as part of that investment and not to come at the end when the projects has begun. About 20 or more UN agencies, funds, and programs, including the UN Environment Program, are involved to ensure the social environmental safeguards are part of that investment. On the biodiversity agenda, this is a priority equally to the government to show by example.
You spoke in the press conference about the importance of monitoring and enforcement, and clearly you didn't pull any punches when you said that the world had failed in meeting its 2020 target. How important is that monitoring and enforcement, that ability to hold accountable actors who need to change?
Monitoring and enforcement is critical to assess progress towards the targets and the goals, because that's the way we can determine how successful are we reaching them. And if monitoring then is consistent, we are also able to make adjustments. The new framework currently under development, the parties already realize that when they set up the process, they've already asked it to also come with a package, review, monitoring, reporting, accountability framework. So long-term strategy is part of the implementation mechanism.
It does come down to leadership again, as you said. And you've set really ambitious target as the potential framework for this next conference of the parties, achieving a 30% of the planet under some sort of protection by the year 2030. That's a huge goal. How important is a fast start? And what's the single most important sector to really make progress in quickly?
Biodiversity or nature issues transcend and cross-sectorial. So prioritizing one against the other might not be the best way. So we need to take all these issues in an integrated, connected way.
Makes it even more challenging, but probably more successful if you do mainstream and take it all at once. Last question, and it's really a pleasure to get to speak to a woman who's leading in the world on this important issue. Tell us about how we can empower women to help achieve the 30 by 30 goal, and what can women in developed countries do to help achieve the goal?
Women are one of the key stakeholders and actor when it comes to biodiversity, especially for the society where I come from in the developing world. Women are the ones fetching firewood, so they are the ones in contact with the forest, they are the ones in contact with the land on a daily life. They are everything in a society, which is completely different with this part of the world. So attention needs to be paid to these women in terms of access rights to the resources. Then there's a risk that their livelihoods can be jeopardized because these have an impact in achieving the conservation objectives we are looking for. One important solution is the equal role in decision-making and management. We have moved away from those years where decisions were only taken by men. These days, we see more and more women engaged, and especially ensuring their rights are as equal.
We agree completely on that. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for your time, and thank you for all your great work on trying to conserve biodiversity across the globe. It's really inspiring, and we will be cheering cheering for you as you go through the next few weeks and then into the Conference of the Parties next year.
It's all of us. It's not just us. Biodiversity, nature is for all of us. You and me, I keep saying, all our actions have an impact on nature. So how do we ensure our footprint do not further damage that precious nature we want to protect and conserve?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.